The information provided is not a substitute for legal and other professional advice where the facts and circumstances warrant. People should always consult their own legal or other professional advisors and discuss the facts and circumstances that apply to their specific circumstances. The information shared on Ask the Landlord is for educational purposes only.
Hello, everyone, and we're back with another episode of Ask the Landlord, episode 21, with our favorite landlord, Albert Dweck. I'm Melissa. I'm one of Albert's producers and a former New York City renter. Together, we're going to be asking this landlord some questions. Here's my question today, Albert. What are issues that landlords deal with that many tenants don't know about?
Good morning, Melissa. Thank you for
morning.
asking that question. And it's a good question. I think that as building owners, we deal with a lot that I think it would be helpful if residents knew about so that they can. I think ultimately this podcast. I want to digress. Ultimately, our goal of this podcast is to bridge the gap between landlords and tenants, so that there's a common understanding. We could produce better housing together, working together, and as to not have this be like an adversarial, two-sided, thing. Because ultimately, these are people's homes, and that's really what making them great places is what this is all about. And at the same time, enabling landlords to also do it in a way that helps them make a living too, right? So enabling people to live and then enabling people to make a living. So that's and one doesn't work without the other. Let me pause there. I said a lot in that one sentence.
Yes.
How is it possible that a landlord can produce housing without making money? So the landlord has to, there has to be a reason why someone produces housing, unless it's done by someone that doesn't need to produce a return. So that you have to have an incentive to produce good housing. So the government could do that, very often with taxpayer dollars. But then ultimately a landlord has to, there has to be a benefit to the landlord to be in this business. So what happens issues that landlords deal with that tenants don't know about, there's all kinds of municipal rules in every municipality usually that a landlord has to comply with and for good reason. I mean, there's safety concerns, inspections, mailings that have to be done on a regular basis. In New York City, there's a local law about inspecting these gas lines that most people don't know about. So a tenant wouldn't know, but what in an effort to make sure that these buildings are safe and that the gas lines aren't leaking and causing hazardous emergency conditions, landlords have to inspect these gas lines, and then the city has sort of every couple of years they do that. They send out inspectors, and some of these buildings are very old and have old systems, and it's and sometimes they find a leak when they pressure test this, and we're like, oh, you have to fix that. So it's these are things that we have to do as landlords on a regular basis. There's various filings we have to do with the city in New York, especially every year, and there's mailings we have to send out to tenants, and there's a lot of compliance things that people don't realize. And then also, all these buildings are insured, and we'll have to have an insurance inspection. So the insurance company says, okay, we're going to give you insurance on this building, and we're going to send out this insurance inspector to make sure everything is okay. So that's something that we need to know about. So the tenants don't know, but these things are going on in the background. Another thing is, there are lenders, there's a bunch of people, involved in these buildings that help them go, so there's there's maintenance staff, there's superintendents, and these people are human, and they're trying to make a living like everyone else, right? So a lot of times tenants don't realize, hey, these people have lives too. They need to be treated nicely with respect, So that's sometimes, on the one hand, people sometimes get frustrated with the management of their building or the way things are being taken care of. But things happen, life happens, and we all live in the same place. Like, very often the super either lives in your building or very nearby, and you know whatever you're going through, they're in a similar situation. They're human. So, you know, as landlords who manage those kind of staff, and that those are, we want to help make their jobs easier. Sometimes you have tenants that do certain things and they don't think about, oh, how is this going to affect other people in the building. I'll just give you a crazy an example, just so
Please do.
So, in New York, the garbage gets picked up 3 times a week. Monday, I don't know, I'm just going to give you an example. It depends on the block, but let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay. Then Wednesday is the day that recycling gets picked up. And also sometimes, bigger things get picked up on Wednesday, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So like everybody else, you're getting boxes from Amazon, whatever, you're ordering
Of
online.
course.
And Wednesday is the day, Tuesday night, right, is the night everything has to be sort of put out on the curb, bundled in a certain way so that we don't get a ticket as a building, right?
I didn't know that.
No, so wherever you are, you're going to have recycling days. So, and there's a way that goes out. So,
Mm-hmm.
You sort of, as a tenant, you should, know where to put your stuff, how it's supposed to go out, so that, somebody doesn't have to break down your boxes or deal with all your stuff. It's not. So there's like a way to realize that, hey, let's be responsible, take some personal responsibility for where I live and the people in my environment, right?
So, what would be the best way for a landlord to communicate that with a tenant? Because when I was living there for 3 years, I was never told how to take out like how to fold down boxes or where to put them. We had 2 silver bins outside of the building, and that was it. And they would get overfilled, and that was.
But maybe that was the way. I'm just saying. So that was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you.
How would you communicate that with your
Right. When someone
tenants?
moves in, they should have like
A welcome
a
packet.
welcome packet that says, "Hey,
Yeah,
this is when the garbage goes out. This is who you call to set up your utilities." And this is a communication
that
to
would be.
landlords too. It's like, what are the frequently asked questions? How do you make
Yeah.
people feel? Like, what are the rules? Where can you get help? One of the things that another issue that we deal with is people don't know what an emergency is.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, what's an emergency?
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
I have a funny story. My parents they're accountants, and they were once told, like, long ago, there are no emergencies in accounting. Meaning, like, it was funny. So
No, so
yeah.
they're usually around a deadline or what's in it, right? So then, I love
Right.
like
Like
when you
what it
call the no, you call right. So I'm going to say this, like, distinguish. I think it's important. You call a doctor and you get their answering service and they go, if this is an emergency, hang up and dial 911.
down. Of
Does
course.
it say that?
Right. Of
So,
course. Do you do that?
right. So, no, for us, we have urgent emergencies. Obviously, power going out is an emergency. A big leak is an emergency. And then there's differences between what
Mm-hmm.
needs to get taken care of immediately and then what's something that can be scheduled to be taken care of,
Mm-hmm. That's
right?
huge.
Within a certain frame, right?
Mhm.
So that's also something that I would include in like a welcome package. Like, here's what an emergency is. Here's when we'll deal with it. Here's who to call. Here's who to call as a
Mhm.
backup plan.
Right.
You know,
I was going to say
he
that.
so so tenants don't realize that sometimes people think, oh, everything that they're dealing with is the most important thing in the world, and it is to them, which is okay. And it has like there's an emergency sort of order, right? Oh, the heat is good in my apartment, but it's not hot enough. Okay, but if someone doesn't have heat, that's an issue. Like not
Right.
having hot water, emergency. Okay, uh, those are but not having water at all is much bigger. So there's a
Right.
relative range, right, of things.
Right.
Right,
Then the
my
water
toilet is
pressure.
stuffed. I can't. The toilet is stuffed right now, right? So
Mhm.
that's an emergency,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't go to the bathroom. So sorry, assuming if you have the toilet stuffed in every one, that's a problem. If you have one and you have another one, that's not. So those are things. Or I have people that call, oh, Albert, my cabinet is loose and it's making noise, and they're like, come right away. I'm like, okay, what I mean, come right away. I will schedule it and we'll come. Well, here's when we'll come, but it's not an emergency, right?
Right.
But there are people who think that, which is which is one of my pet
The
peeves. But
li-
I I got you.
the light in my fridge is out. Help.
Right,
Not an
right,
emergency.
right. Not an emergency, but I can also see how something like that could be put on the back burner and not and missed, right, because of other emergencies that happen. So
Mhm.
that's it is important to continue to communicate with landlords, and you know obviously there are times of year that things get crazy, like when it how about if you have a cold snap, right? And
Mhm.
all of a sudden a building, it gets is fine, and then people are cooler or whatever, and we're having an issue with the boiler, let's say. But at that same time, plumbers are deployed taking care of boilers all over the city, right? So you're like, oh,
Mhm.
I can't get the guy to come right away, right? But we always manage to. But it's like something to note. Oh, this is not only happening to me, which is um, interesting. And then there's also one of the things that landlords deal with that tenants don't know is there's a lot of politics involved in housing, and um, that create um interesting situations that landlords have to deal with. Something that was recently in the pandemic was there was a period where we couldn't evict people, uh, which was appropriate for a time, but um, ultimately, again, you want to have good housing. You have to be the landlord has to collect rent in order to take care of the building you know,
Mhm.
to
The cycle
you know,
must
and
continue.
yes, it does, and I think
Yeah.
also we've spoken about this in earlier episodes. People think, oh, landlords make a lot of money, and I think there was a study done recently in the last couple of years where they said, oh, out of $1 that's collected in rent, landlords end up with like 6 cents.
It's not, yeah,
So
not
it's
too good at
not
profit margins.
right. It's not really it's not really a big profit margin. So
Yeah, Shark
uh,
Tank would not give you a deal.
no,
I know.
you got to do it on volume and size and all that. So it's like
Absolutely.
yeah. So those are some things that go on outside of people's homes, but around where they live, that they should be aware of. The landlord's concerns, the and situations and capabilities and people who work in the building,
Mhm.
and how there's like a symbiotic relationship between
Mhm.
everyone there, that's ultimately, if it works well, everything will work better.
Of course. That
So
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, cool.
I have a really random question follow-up for that. Just a funny one. How many
Okay.
plumbers do you have on speed dial?
Oh, you know, at least six.
Or at least 6?
Yeah,
Or
because
could
you
you
have,
even,
what happens if you have an emergency and you can't get somebody, and then
right?
and
You have
there are
to.
certain guys that are good at certain things, and my employees are very good at certain things, and then when it goes beyond what they can do, they got to hire a guy, and then you got it. One
Hmm.
guy comes, another guy comes, and one guy's good for one thing, another guy's good for another thing, and
Right.
and then you're like, it's the sometimes things get costly, and there are people who don't have time. There are certain
Hmm.
plumbers, like, they're busy, but if they charge you triple, they'll come, of course. So
Of course.
why am I, that doesn't make sense, and that's not, I understand it makes sense in, like, if it's an emergency, but I you know it, this is like everything else, so there are times that happens and we have to pay, but
Hmm.
difficult. So that's why you build relationships with multiple sources.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. So there's a lot of things on the back end that a landlord has to deal with that tenants think, oh, it's just a phone call away for me as a tenant, but then it might cost you like 8 phone calls to get one job done. So I think just, again, the communication aspect is really important.
Very much so. Very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. That was so informative. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
For more episodes, please subscribe to Ask the Landlord on your favorite podcast platform. We'd appreciate it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to watch the show, check out our Ask the Landlord YouTube channel. If you have a question for Albert, feel free to contact him on Instagram at Ask the Landlord and check out his TikTok at Ask the Landlord. Bridging the gap between landlords and tenants, this has been Ask the Landlord. Thanks for listening.